This is the American Indians, Indigenous Peoples Truths. Justice for all, the most dangerous show on media anywhere. OCO and greetings. I'm Winter Nightwolf, and this is the American Indian Indigenous Peoples Truths. Justice for all, the most dangerous show on media anywhere. Hello, Sandra. How are you?
Hi, Jay. Welcome to Wednesday. Glad to see you.
Absolutely.
Glad to be here.
You know, we have two very special guests tonight. One is my good friend, Dr. Carmen Johnson, and the other one is the famous Judge Joe Brown. So stay tuned. We're going to be back in just a minute to introduce the guests and carry on a conversation titled Political Purpose, Misguided and Shady Injustice. I'll be back in just a few minutes. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the most dangerous broadcast on media anywhere. Sandra, how are you today?
I am wonderful, Jay. How are you?
I'm good.
Can't complain.
No need to. Nobody's listening anyway. I have some great guests tonight, and we're going to be talking about something that has been quite disturbing to my good friend, Dr. Carmen Johnson. And I'm happy that Judge Joe Brown has stepped in to help her with her issue. So let me introduce first, Dr. Carmen Johnson. How are you, Carmen?
I am doing just fine. Thank you for having me this evening. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing well.
I'm honored that you're here. I really am. And having an opportunity to speak your truths to power, corrupted power. I also have with us Judge Joe Brown. Hello, Your Honor. How you doing, brother?
Hello, everybody. I didn't add this on the front end. 72 years ago, I got registered as a Choctaw by my mother and grandmother. So, yeah.
Oh, okay. Wonderful.
So we relate.
Commonality.
Yeah. Well, let me tell everybody what I am, so there'd be no questions about it. On my mother's side, from South Carolina, is my Cherokee part of the family. My family and ancestors of them were the ones that refused to go on the Trail of Tears. And they went up into the mountains of South Carolina and fought Andrew Jackson off. On my father's side, my father's father, my grandpa, he was a Western Shoshone and Cherokee. and he was also a man didn't take any mess. But my grandmother, Sylvia Robles Cruz, was a Taino Indian born in Old San Juan, Puerto Rico. So we got this blood tie, all of us here tonight. Sandra Hope is a Halawasaponi, and my executive producer is Mississippi Choctaw and African American. So now that we've cleared the board.
Well, I have a homegirl here in Mississippi Choctaw, because it was in Mississippi I got registered way back when. All right.
We are a family of Blindians.
So, Carmen, let's start with you. Tell us about who you are.
I am an Aboriginal American woman. I was born in Blythewood, South Carolina. I am part Cherokee, part Seminole, part Haitian, and a couple of other things, English, Irish, all of that kind of stuff. I grew up in a political household. I grew up in a family that was very community driven and family oriented. And Mother Teresa was my idol.
Wow.
And I grew up in Christianity, and I thought that Jesus was my best friend. And I later became a practicing Buddhist. And I became an activist and a humanitarian and a philanthropist. And I, became, the same thing that my grandmother was, which was growing up on loving our people and making sure that our people are being taken care of. And it ultimately bit me in the butt, let's say.
Mm.
But your ancestors are the ones that drove you to do all of the right things that you did.
Absolutely.
Okay. Judge Joe Brown, tell us who you are.
I'm still trying to figure that out. As long as I'm breathing, I'll be working on it. Now, that's one image of me. It's kind of a stuffy image. Some say a pretty boy image, but what can I say? That was after I hit 50, so I had a firm grounding in reality.
Mm-hmm.
I'm somebody who got taught as a kid, heard it from everywhere, grandparents, aunts, uncles, parents, neighbors, friends thereof, and everybody, that the main business in life was making sure that somebody remembered you when you weren't around anymore, and you did that best by making a difference. So it was lead. Sacrifice self is not all about money. It's about what legacy you leave behind, because you're not going to be here long. And in retrospect, I haven't been here very long, even though some might say it's a number of years. So you get older, you get to understanding what that means, and you start saying, well, I'm glad I did stuff that lets me sleep at night.
I can't agree with you more.
And there are worse things than dying.
Yeah.
Here's one thing about life: you ain't getting out of it alive. So
Yeah.
you're gonna die anyway. At least make your living about some kind of purpose.
Yeah, and you know what? Folks are dying every day to see the Undertaker.
You're an ambulance, and the Undertaker say business.
Yeah. So, Carmen, tell us your story. Why are you here, and what do you want my audience and all of us to know about what happened to my friend, Carmen Johnson?
I want the audience to know that I was politically hit by one of the most powerful men in Maryland. And they didn't like the fact that I was helping, people of color in the community. And at that particular time, it was the housing crisis that was going on. And I was trying to get a moratorium to freeze the illegal foreclosures that was happening in the Black and brown community. And in those homes lived Black husbands, Black fathers, Black mothers, Black wives, Black children. And, you know, people always say that, you know, Black men or men of color don't marry Black women, but these were families. And my concern was mostly about the families opposed to the homes. Subjectively, I was trying to get a moratorium to freeze these foreclosures that was happening. And I was told by this most powerful man to stop and to go back on the news to say that we did not have any illegal foreclosures or foreclosures going on in the state of Maryland. And that was emphatically not true. You know, these foreclosures was happening all over the United States. So what would make Maryland different? So I told him that I wasn't going to go back on the news to say that it wasn't true or that I made a mistake. And you know, they also offered me, you know, money. They, you know, asked me how much did I want, and I refused to sell my people out. I just couldn't do that. They harassed me, they stalked me, you know, and I lived alone, and they were coming in and out of my home. I was being followed. At that time, I was the housing chair for the state conference NAACP at that particular time. And they did not protect me or stand with me. And it's really unfortunate because, you know, the NAACP is a big organization that supposed to stand up for, you know, people of color. And that did not happen for me. And I was an executive there. And matter of fact, when I did get arrested, my parents called the NAACP in Prince George's County in the state of Maryland and also national, and they said they didn't even know who I was. So that's just disgusting within itself. But moving right along, you know, going through this process, they was trying to force me to take a plea, to say I did something when I didn't do anything. They ultimately slid me into a real case with 14 foreigners. And the two head people got on the stand and said that I didn't know about their scam. I wasn't part of their community. I didn't financially benefit. And they ultimately found me guilty on 24 counts of mortgage bank and wire fraud. And I was arrested immediately. They said I was a terrorist. They said that I was ISIS. They said that I was dangerous to the state of Maryland and that they had to protect their streets and get me off the streets immediately. So that's pretty much that piece, which was very disgusting. Was I afraid? Yeah, but I wasn't afraid enough to lie on myself and say I did something when I didn't do what they say that I did. Matter of fact, they didn't even tell me what I did. They just kept asking me what did I do, and then they said, okay, we want to offer you a plea of 30 years. That was the first plea. I don't remember what the second plea was, and then the third plea was for 10.5 years. But the point is, when they offered me the 30-year plea, they was asking me to tell them what I did, and I didn't even know what they were talking about. And then 3 or 4 years later, they slid me into a real mortgage fraud case that I had nothing to do with except offer credit restoration services. And it's just a horrible thing. I'm sorry, it just makes me emotional to talk about.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm going to ask you,
Doctor, let me ask Doctor one question. Would you tell us about what they did to you in the institution, the torture aspect as well, trying to get you to make an admission of something you did not do? The heat lamps and the cubicle.
Yeah. Yeah. So me not growing up in a world of crime, not knowing that in the prison system, they don't like when you're an activist. They don't like when you maintain your innocence. And then I was in racist West Virginia. So I had 3 strikes against me. And I refused to answer to inmate. I refused to answer to criminal. I refused to answer to anything other than my name. And if they would not call me by my name, I would not respond. Subjectively, I was ultimately drug on the floor by like 20 white guards, men, and I've never experienced domestic violence before in my life. I was strangled until I passed out. I was burnt on my forehead with T5 fluorescent lights.
What they did, they put you in a small box on a regular basis, and they turned the heat lamps on, and you would suffer from heat prostration. Isn't that how you came to their attention? Because on an independent basis, they were investigating this penal institution for its torture and mistreatment of inmates.
Yeah, because I started filing complaints.
And you don't like to talk about that. You had to go through therapy as a result. That's why you're not getting into it.
Yeah, I'm still in extensive therapy. I do therapy every Friday since 2018. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, I didn't mean to interject, but I know you have difficulty talking about that.
So anyway, Carmen, you never admitted to any guilt in any of this process, correct?
No, I did not. To this day, I'm on my 2nd trip to the Supreme Court.
Okay.
This is my 2nd time going to the Supreme Court.
Okay. So you're going to the Supreme Court to do what?
Well, in 2017, we went to the Supreme Court trying to exonerate me. And the Supreme Court denied that, saying that a jury of my peers found me guilty, even though I had little to do with these crimes. So then we filed a writ of error quorum nobis. When I came home, we filed that, stating that the courts were emphatically wrong with the judgment that they served on me, the restitution, the sentencing, all of that they got it wrong. And the fact that they took my money and things of that nature. And so the writ of error quorum nobis sat on the lower court's judge's desk for like 14 months. And then it was ultimately denied. And they said that I couldn't file a writ of error quorum nobis because I was still in custody because I'm on low risk probation. And then they denied the 2255 in I think August of 2020 because they said you have to be in custody, and then we couldn't fight it with a 2255. So then when we filed in the appeals court, they said that they were going to go with what the lower court said, but they wouldn't file an opinion. And so then my attorney, he just yesterday finished the 2nd Supreme Court filing, which only deals with the restitution, and it deals with the illegal seizure of my money. And the reason why we had to go that route is because I did not want to continue to fight in the lower court under the 2255 and the writ of error quorum nobis, because one is saying because I'm still in custody and the other one is saying because I'm not in custody. So they was just confusing things. So we were like, let's just go ahead to the Supreme Court and see what happens. But I don't have faith in that system. I met Judge Joe Brown last year, and he read through my case, and he was just disgusted, and he can speak for himself what his thought was when he read what he read.
Okay. Before we go any further, there's been several comments and questions and I would like to read them to you. The first one, this one is a good friend of mine. He's like a nephew to me. His name is Larry Fisher. He's the chief sachem of his tribe up in New England. He says, Dr. Johnson, thank you for sharing your story, as I know this is not something easy to do, but it will support others that are in the same situation. Many blessings to you, and our tribe will keep you in our prayers. Chief Sachem Fisher.
Thank you.
He is like a nephew with me. As a matter of fact, he's down here visiting me now. Then I have an attorney. Her name is Anita Jo Shiflett, and she's Tuscarora Indian from North Carolina. So when the state uses its resources against you, you are in serious trouble. She says, I feel for you, Dr. Johnson. I hope that you prevail in the Supreme Court, and I'm praying that you do too.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Johnson, I think you and 14 other people were charged with the 24 counts of mortgage, bank, and wire fraud, correct?
Exactly.
So you were then sentenced to 57 months of prison, and you served 44 of those months in that racist West Virginia work camp. So you were released in 2018, correct?
Yes, early release. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so you'll be on probation until 2023.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. And not to mention that as a part of that charge, you were ordered to pay $2 million in restitution, correct?
2.4 million.
2.4 million. So I'm being facetious, when I say that, your aggregate return since 2010 and now, at a very minimum, is a negative 2-point-something million. So, they think that you benefited somehow from the allegations and the charges, but you are actually way, 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 way in the red, and you have not benefited from that, what you were accused of in any way. And of course, as your page says, Article 72, the president can't vindicate or exonerate you. And the only thing that can bring you some relief at this point is if the president grants you a full pardon.
It should be Articles 2. That's number 1. And number 2, the 14 Africans, because that's what they were, they took pleas and I did not. And if anybody wants to go to the transcripts, they'll see that the 2 head Africans said that I knew nothing about their scam, nor did I financially benefit, nor am I part of their community. You'll see that in there. And the trial should have stopped at that time, and it did not.
Now, Carmen, when they raided your house, how much money did they take from you? And why haven't you gotten it back?
They did not allow me to have an evidentiary hearing to prove that my assets were clean.
And how much money are we talking about?
It's almost $1 million, but the amount keeps getting lower and lower. Every time I see the paperwork, the amount gets lower and lower.
Started off at 3.1 million or something like that, didn't it?
Somewhere around in there.
That's a technicality they put in the law about 40 years ago. Somebody in the White House right now was responsible, along with Strom Thurmond, for that allowed the prosecution to use its resources to ruin somebody that they couldn't get a conviction on. So what I was reading, your well done petition for error coram nobis, which basically is about the 4th or 5th one I've seen in 50 years. And it detailed how they were forced to concede that they didn't have any basis for at the moment for, at that time, seizing or keeping the money, but they thought that they might develop one in the future, so they were going to hold on to it, which they were permitted to do, which part of your issues span around on that about being unable to hire counsel because they essentially deprived you of all funds. Now, since that time, they have not developed any reason to hold them, but they're still holding what is left over after a continuous assessment of their particular brand of cost. Now, at the time this was going on with you, I was out on the West Coast during this show I had, and I'd been a criminal court judge got elected to 2 8-year terms before that show. Now, One West Bank, who had Steve Mnuchin as the CEO and had as its major investor George Soros, got indicted in 5,200 plus counts of various indictments in San Diego County, LA County, San Joaquin County, Sacramento County, all over the state of California. At that point, Soros and his family and wife each maxed out their contributions to Kamala Harris when she was running for state attorney general. So did Mnuchin. He and his wife and family each contributed to political maximum. George Soros contributed $16 million directly to a Lenore Anderson, who was part of Kamala Harris's team. Well, Kamala Harris got elected state attorney general, and under the provisions of California law, she consolidated all 5,200 plus counts of the indictment and dismissed them. I had 3 neighbors at the time. I was living in a place called Ojai, California, and I had a nice ranch, and they were getting fraudulent, the alleged mortgage foreclosures against them were fraudulent, and they were almost losing their property. They were very bent out of shape when the charges got dismissed. But shortly after that happened in 2013, One West Bank was sold for $3.4 billion. And that's about the same time this was going on with you. And from what I looked at and investigated, it was part of the nationwide scam, basically, of having allowed mortgages to be issued by banks with insufficient credit and collateral and then foreclosed upon to acquire properties for dirt cheap that still had not lost their value. Now, one thing I just want to briefly add, we think of the rights under the Bill of Rights as criminal rights. They're not really criminal rights, they're political rights that, due to the unique nature of the country over the last 240 some years, have not been applied so much to political factions as they have been developed with people who have been charged with criminal offenses. But those laws, those rights that protect criminal defendants were primarily set up to protect people from political oppression, because the same devices that you can use to prosecute can also be used to persecute. And that looks like precisely what happened to you. Now, don't forget the prosecutorial entity was relative to the governor, who had his hands in this mortgage scam going on in your state. And this particular individual governor had aspirations to the White House. So by what you were doing, blowing the whistle, you were causing him some great political difficulties, which strikes me as the reason you were being requested to rescind your accusations. Now, I had a client back in the 80s who was the largest African-American mortgage real estate agent in the state of Tennessee, and he blew the whistle on the Reagan administration's HUD operation. And on the day before the statute of limitations ran, they indicted him on 68 counts. We had to go through 3 trials. Now, I was smart enough to keep him from getting found guilty on the first trial, which was discovery, because when you have an innocent client under the federal system, you are behind the 8 ball because you don't know anything and they don't have to disclose anything at all to you except written statements signed by your client. You can't get anything until somebody testifies, and then you get about 15 minutes to review the transcripts of that particular witness's testimony. So they used somebody to get my client in the picture who supposedly was possessed of only a second grade education and was a bumpkin and got defrauded by my client. By the time we went to trial 3, it developed that this person not only had more than a second grade education, he had a master's of business administration from a major university. He had bought his first house at 19, and the government knew that he had 178 houses he had bought under sham corporations that had a Section 8 tenant in there that he continued to collect the rent, even though the affidavit required that in order to acquire the homes, he had to be the primary resident, which he was not. So his scam is between 14 and 36 months, he would not pay any of the mortgage payments. The properties would be foreclosed upon, but he had collected the rentals for that period of time under Section 8. And the sham corporations would be left holding the bag, which basically all that happened was they got dissolved and he didn't care. One of the primary things that was wrong was that the government was alleging that my client loaned this poor second grade dropout liar who had an MBA the down payment money, but we could prove that he got it from the local teachers credit union because he had a contract through a cleaning business to clean up 7 elementary schools. So he got that loan, got the cash from the credit union 2 hours before the transaction was entered into. And guess what? Under the federal rules, we couldn't introduce that, even though we had proof. See, you get caught in a mess.
That's true. And Carmen, I'm looking at your writ of era coram nobis. It says in your writ, the petitioner, which is you, asked the court to vacate and forfeiture the restitution judgment and return your illegally seized funds back to you. And that's the Fourth Circuit Court described the nature of the writ of era of coram nobis in the United States versus Akinsaid. As a remedy of last resort, the writ of this era coram nobis is granted only where an error is of the most fundamental character, and there exists no other available remedy, such as United States versus Mandel. So where does this Carmen, Judge Brown, where does this leave her?
It's kind of a loose place. With due respect to their honors, our appellate courts are populated by people who had no practical experience as lawyers dealing with real live human beings. They tend to come from an academic background, a corporate background, or they're political hacks. To give you an example, we had a certain, at that time, young lady who had put her husband through law school. She then went to law school. She got out of law school. She took the bar. She passed it. In Tennessee, you have to be 30 years of age to be a state judge. She turned 30 years of age 2 weeks before she was sworn into the bar. Then Governor Lamar Alexander, a sometime aspirant for president of the United States, appointed her to a circuit court judgeship, which is the same level I had, 4 days after she got sworn in from the bar, less than 6 months out of law school. And she didn't even know how many charges that the parties would get against prospective jurors during jury selection. She was the biggest amateur in there. So in other words, the first time she ever set foot in the courtroom was when she showed up as a judge in a black robe. Now, the Reagan administration appointed her a federal judge 14 months after she graduated from law school. Now she's sitting on the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. So I assume she has learned some law over the intervening years, but the problem is that instead of learning them as a lawyer, doing an apprentice intern thing, she learned them at the expense of the public. So the most Well, the least knowledgeable individual in the courtroom was the judge. I mean, that's the kind of thing we had. Now, when you see me in these pictures, I'm in my 50s, mid 50s, so I know I'm looking good, but you know, I ain't young and tender. I've been out of law school for a while, in life for a while. But the point is that we have too many people on these benches who have insufficient experience in dealing with constitutional law. Only 25% of your American judges and attorneys have actually read the Constitution of the United States. They have studied constitutional law, but they've never read the document. And the average high school graduate can finish up the whole U.S. Constitution in about 15 minutes if he goes slow. And most of that is obsolete because it only deals with structuring the government. And after 1808 or 1806, it was no longer in effect. And then nowadays, when most of the people who graduated over the intervening 50 years since I did, they take con law when it comes to conflict of interest in corporations, but they don't deal with people law.
Yes.
And as a consequence, you get some of the most ridiculous decisions because they just don't have, I've seen this when it works. What does all this mean? And there's this tendency to use the power of the federal system for persecution. The U.S. attorney is an enormously powerful person. And over the last 40 years, there have been some changes in the federal law that specifically allow and encourage the U.S. attorney to literally persecute someone to get rid of them, literally, even if they can't get a conviction. One of the preeminent methods is to financially ruin the person by prosecution after prosecution, or prosecutions that are going to be ruinous in terms of time and resources and compensation to counsel and investigative staff. There's only so much people can get a hold of unless they're very rich, and then in which case they just don't have it. Now, that was one of the things that happened to Dr. Johnson. And I would point this out too, that the federal system has gotten inordinately complex over the years. There's so much red tape attached, it is ridiculous. For example, you go into a federal court, you represent the defendant, you've got 15 days to file all motions. If your client is pristinely innocent, you're at a loss because you basically don't know where to go because the client doesn't know anything about what's going on. And they don't have to tell you. In the states, every single state requires that the prosecution, unless they have an organized crime situation that they can prove to a judge, they have to turn over the names of all witnesses, addresses, phone numbers of those not only that they have, but in the exercise of due diligence, they should be able to come up with. Otherwise, you can't call that witness or use that evidence at trial without some good and sound excuse. In the federal system, they don't tell you anything. You know nothing, and you're floundering. So you have 15 days to file these motions, and you have to brief every single point, which is sometimes the lawyers will get to looking at each other. I mean, God's sake, everybody knows that, but the case, do you remember what case that was? I remember looking at it in 1974, but I haven't seen it since.
Okay, well, I got a question for you, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
What can we do to help her?
What you need to do is publicize this. See, the pardon process is a freebie.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot question the president's or the governor's pardons. Every state constitution, the U.S. Constitution makes that clear. You have to make it a political issue so that for good cause politically, the chief executive sees that it's in his or her best interest to pardon the person. You found a lot of old-time Western bad men did a few years in prison, but they didn't really have an effective parole system. So what would happen is they would get let go when the governor pardoned them or commuted their sentence, which means pardon means you didn't do it and you're forgiven. Commutation is, well, you served enough time. That's the end of it. You're out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, people always want to question why a president did something, but the law is designed so he does not have to explain himself.
And there's a petition currently on change.org that was started by Justice Warriors. Is that the right petition for our audience to support you on, Dr. Johnson? Is that the
Yeah.
most recent?
Yeah, it's been sitting there since September. I've had a lot of people that look like you and I that have told me that they were going to support my petition. And it's really unfortunate, and I really don't care. I've had people say, well, if you're innocent, why are you asking for a pardon? Well, if you read my petition and my website, Carmen's story, very carefully, it clearly states I'm asking the chief and commanding officer to investigate my case to its fullest, to investigate the Department of Justice and the state of Maryland, what they did to me, because what they did to me was disgusting. That's what I'm asking for.
And it was
Now,
wrong. And it was wrong.
it was horrible. And I just want other people that look like us to not have to go through what I went through. It's so many people that look like us that take that plea, and I refused. And when they said, well, you're going to get 30 years, I'm like, let's go to trial, not knowing that the trial, the jury that I had, I don't believe was a real jury. It couldn't have been, because it was no way
And
they.
not only that, let me interject something here. You had an amateur judge who was just recently appointed to the bench at the time. So he didn't know what he was doing. And he was trying to be overcautious, and he failed to do during the course of your trial in terms of the admission of evidence and other things that should never have been allowed. And there's the other thing too. He had the authority as what they call the 13th juror to override the jury and set aside the bloody verdict, which is what he should have done. But a lot of judges, well, let's just put it this way, they don't want to jeopardize their employment opportunities, so they don't do what they ought to do. And we don't need more of those on the bench. There's also a bad trend, and this reflects it, because it can be from hidden angles or obvious angles. It's called mob justice. A lot of the woke people think that they're supposed to be able to influence the outcome of a legal proceeding. Justice is blind. He's not supposed to see it, but they want to influence it. And they don't realize that anytime you have a legal precedent or principle, it is a two-edged sword. It swings both ways.
Yeah,
So-
and I just want to, I see a note in there. Judge Joe Brown is not my attorney. He's my friend. And
Great. I'm not practicing law. I'm
yeah,
retired.
he saw an interview that I was on, and he said, and he can say it for himself, that a couple of people had told him about me, and then he saw me on an interview, and then that's how we got in contact with one another. And he was just blown away, I guess. You can speak for yourself, Judge. But
Well, okay. I get so many requests for help. I get letters every day, and I find most of them, there's not that much to it. But with yours, when I investigated it, it looked like a serious wrongdoing. It looked like persecution for all of the wrong reasons. It's not a violent crime. There were no victims here. There was the effort to put you in a situation which was, I used to be a prosecutor, so I know how it works. Let's find something to put her in this matter on. We can come up with something. Let's see if we can catch her. And the fact that she has really little to do with it would make it easier to get her. So that's what they did with you. And it's wrong. And what happened to you embodies most of is wrong with our justice system, because everybody thinks of it as a matter of fighting crime or protecting criminals. And even if you take that, aren't you worried about representing somebody who's guilty? It's not a matter of whether the person's guilty. It's a matter of whether or not the state meets its burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt and follows due process and equal protection of the law, so the state as an all-powerful entity doesn't develop bad habits. But in your case, it's literally just flat out persecution. There is no rhyme nor reason for somebody like you to have been convicted under the circumstances. But again, we have another thing going on here. You have a female attorney, prosecutor, and she's determined to make a name for herself. So she wants scalp on a lodgepole, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So she gets bragging rights. So she's going out to get one. And I have encountered that type too, where, lady, don't you get it that there is no justice in this? Well, I'm going to beat you. It's not me. What about justice, lady justice? I don't care. I'm going to win this case. I let her go on and go do her thing. And when I get to work in magic with a jury, I stomp on her. You know, like my client, my opponent, my opposition was here trying to make a point so she could get a trophy on her den wall. But we're not here about her beating me. We're here about justice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I find that is a very bad thing amongst the cadre of prosecutors. In my personal opinion, as a prosecutor, at one point, criminal defense lawyer, chief public defender for the city, private practice doing trial lawyer, and a criminal court judge, as a category, probably some of the most corrupt people you'll find in America are career prosecutors. Not all of them, but they've been used to exercising too much power, too long, too often, with no accountability, and power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
There's a Native American brother that just made a statement, Stephen Redclay, and he says, because she is a person of color helping her people, the system is rigged against her. And yes, it is. But I think that the judicial system in America, the American judicial system, has been long overdue for an overhaul.
Let me tell you one of the bases for why you are exactly right. The criminal justice system is no longer about controlling crime. Nobody's conspired to make it happen, but it is morphed into a device to control surplus labor. There simply are not enough jobs to go around. The problem's getting worse due to industrial technology and computerization. So if you think about workers, jobs, and the labor market is a commodity market, with labor being the commodity. What happens is you have a glut in that commodity market. So what you do when you have a commodity glut is you cut back production, store the surplus, and subsidize the would-be producer. You store the surplus in a jail cell instead of a grain silo. The subsidy is the assistance check, and cutting back production is all of the foolishness that goes into the heads of the youth. So they drop out, bang out, drug out, get pregnant too early, too often. They develop inappropriate attitudes, lifestyles, worldviews, lack of vocational skills, lack of academic achievement, and they become unemployable. And then when they clown and carry on, they tear down their communities, and that keeps those communities from being politically cohesive and capable of using the political process for collective self-help. Meanwhile, it scares all the rest of the good people into being more worried about getting jumped on walking to or arriving at their carport than they are with the economic mess that they find themselves in. So it's a good game. It helps things work out, and the criminal justice system has become something that is no longer so much interested in justice as it is in furthering the economic circumstances of certain classes. Either the entrepreneur, because somebody like Dr. Johnson was interfering with the investment activities of certain parties, or it makes the world safe from Timothy McVeigh types getting riled up enough to go blow up a courthouse in Oklahoma City using ammonium nitrate fertilizer.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's just a simple matter of keeping certain folk from getting upset because there's no glut in the market.
Okay. I got something to say about all of this. First of all, I want to commend Dr. Johnson for being the director of Court Watch for Prince George's County, Maryland, and political judicial accountability. I want to commend you for doing that because that shows me that you got the gumption not to give up. But secondly, I got to make a statement. And some folks out there ain't going to like it, but I don't care whether they like it or not. This mess started over 500 years ago when the Europeans came across the Atlantic Ocean and invaded us. And since then, it's been holy hell. They came here, and the first people that they enslaved were the Native American people. Then they went to Africa and stole our brothers and sisters from Africa and brought them over here. And nothing has been fair. There's been no damn justice whatsoever ever since they stepped into our pristine waters and bountiful homelands. So what's happening to you, Dr. Johnson, is a direct result of what they started over 500 years ago. Now we need to break the cycle. How we break the cycle, I'm not absolutely sure, but I know there's got to be a remedy to this, and it's going to take some time to do it. Maybe not. What do you think about that?
I think, well, I'm always saying that, people that look like us that are in positions to help, somehow or another, they end up being bought out or they don't help. And a couple of things that the feds know about me is, number one, I can't be bought out. Number two, I'm not going to take a plea for something I didn't do. And for number three, they know I'm not a criminal. But people that are in positions to help, they don't help. They look like us. They just don't. And it's really unfortunate. And is a reason why I am the director of Court Watch Judicial Accountability with an organization called Life After Release, with our wonderful executive director, Carmen Johnson, who's absolutely amazing, who gave me that opportunity when I didn't have a voice. And I have to show up in those courtrooms because injustice happened in an empty courtroom. In my courtroom, it was empty because I didn't tell anybody. I figured that it was all a big mistake. It was all going to work itself out. And I did not know that our justice system was not about justice. So, I've sat in over 3,000 bond review hearings. And Kiana and I was just featured on the front of the Washington Post last month.
Yeah.
Watch. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and then now, of course, August of last year, I've started a nonprofit called Helping Ourselves to Transform, and Judge Joe Brown is the ambassador of our amazing nonprofit, and we offer reentry services. Because when I first came home, no one could help me. They didn't know what to do with me. I was overqualified. I had mental health issues. I was, suffering from PTSD, which I still suffer from that. I was just messed up. Mm-hmm. And so the services that we are offering are paramount. And the services that we don't offer, we have partnered with so many other organizations that will be able to offer the services that are needed. And so I'm excited about the future. If the Supreme Court don't want to give me what I'm asking for, that's fine. If the President of the United States don't want to investigate what the Department of Justice has done to me and has done to so many other people, that's fine too. I have to keep going. I have to look at this situation as a sabbatical, and I have to keep going, and I have to keep speaking to the men and the women to not take a plea for something you didn't do, to stand up for yourself, to stand up for what's right.
Absolutely.
So,
So
so,
listen,
Doctor,
before you, Sandra, before you do that,
sure.
there's a petition on change.org. And I want to read what one great man wrote, and he signed a petition. And I want all of you to go to change.org and sign her petition. This man says, I'm signing because I am her father. And I saw firsthand the good she was doing and how the government set her up to take the fall for all major banking industries that have for decades preyed upon the poor to enrich themselves. The JP Morgans, the Bank of Americas, and all of the crooks who regularly prey on the poor. When they got caught, they trumped up charges to save themselves from the public getting wise to how they really operate. Lock up the bank conspirators. We need the truth. But unfortunately, we live among the lying wealthy barons who made their fortunes on the backs of the poor and are still stealing from all of us. On that, we're going to take a break and come back. And I just want you all to think about that. This petition is of the utmost importance. And I want you to sign it. So, Sandra, can you hold your point until we get back?
I can. You give me double time.
That's why I love you so much. You're very understanding. And we're back. Sandra, I believe you had a question or a statement that you wanted to make before we went to break. Go right ahead and do it. And I've got to roll out for a minute because I got a puppy in distress. Let me go let her out. I'll be right back.
Go save Sheba. Yeah, thank you, Jay. So I wanted to ask you something, Dr. Johnson, about your organization. But before I do that, I want to bring a reminder to Judge Joe. Joe, I don't know if you remember. Well, I know you remember this event in 2010. There was a Wintley Phipps has a U.S. Dream Academy Gala that he generally has had every year up until COVID struck. The ninth one was in Washington, D.C., and that was in 2010. And I actually met you at that event.
Yes, you did. I was still married then. There you go. I remember you. I recognized that when I saw you. When I said, oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, that was a great event. And I mean, if you remember, Charles Dutton was there. You know, people know him as Rock. Chris Tucker was there. Chris Tucker and his mom. I took this wonderful picture of Chris Tucker and his mom. And people asked me why I didn't get in the picture. And I said, well, because I was posing as media and I had a great camera, so they allowed me in, but I wasn't really media. So if I'd asked to be in the picture, they would have said, she's not really with the media. So I didn't do that. But
naughty, but it was ingenious.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great event. You know, of course, there was Lou Gossett was there, Angela Bassett was there. And I think, in fact, there was a comment made by somebody on stage about your wife. Is that right?
Yeah, it was. The moderator did that. She gave her a compliment.
Yeah. So, but,
she was flattered.
Yes. So, I really, it was a great event. I was very honored to meet you there, as well as some other folks. But, those people who may not know, the U.S. Dream Academy is a nonprofit that was, founded by Wintley Phipps, and it's to empower children that are most at risk of incarceration. So, of course, Charles Dutton grew up in Baltimore, and he grew up looking out of his bedroom window at a prison. At the prison. So at that event, his keynote speech was about how he grew up as a child knowing and just believing that it was his destiny to go to prison. And there were some family members that were in prison. So, one of the things that the Dream Academy does is to try to empower children that are most at risk for that. And so that event, kind of lends itself to what Dr. Johnson, what your new organization is doing, helping ourselves to transform. And I just wanted to point out that, but that organization, your sister Karen is the executive director. Is that correct?
Yes, she is.
Okay. So one of your quotes that, as I understand it, you're known for is "Do something to justify your existence. Together we can create the future." And I would think that based on your life and that your sister Karen was one of your biggest supporters, I would say that the two of you are kind of the epitome of that quote. What has your sister Karen really meant to you throughout this whole ordeal?
I mean, it got to a point where, when I was at that prison camp, she was really the only one that was answering the phone. And then, after I lost in the Supreme Court, I just lost it. And I'm like, yo, I need you to plug in my cell phone. I need you to start calling some of these politicians where I have their numbers to tell them where I am and what's going on with me. And I'm being abused and I was politically hit and I'm innocent and blah, blah, blah. And I remember her telling me, well, it's not going to work. The attorney says it's not going to work, but I'll do it anyway. And I was able to get out a little earlier than anticipated. And I owe her my life. And she is 9 years younger than me. And without her, You know, there's so many things you can't do with the word felon, just that's over top of your head. They wouldn't give me my SSDI, you know, and I paid into it for so many years. They wouldn't give me that. They wouldn't allow me to file bankruptcy. I mean, it's so much that's tied into that. The abuse that I am still feeling today that I shouldn't have never felt. And the things that I've seen, I shouldn't have never seen. And it's really disgusting. And I don't see any miracles that's going to happen in the Supreme Court. And now the only thing that's left is President Biden is to investigate what the Department of Justice did to me. But my sister, my baby sister, that's 9 years younger than me, I owe her my life.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, you need to, you know, you don't need to, but my premise of operation is that there's somebody greater than all of us. They told me I wouldn't be here. I'm a 4-time stage 4 cancer survivor, and I'm fighting it again. But I know that when man closes a door in your face, whoever you pray to and call your God is there listening. And I've had some personal experiences with this entity. I know. So Carmen, I will always be on your side. Come hell or high water, I'll be there for you. And I know Judge Brown will too, and all of my friends and everybody else. So I want you to be of good spirits. Something's going to come through for you. There's a breakthrough coming. I had a dream about this last night, and I don't dream that often. But Carmen, I love you dearly, and I wish you all the best. And anything I can do to help you, please do. Don't hesitate to call me. And will you come back again sometime?
We talk all the time, yeah.
But this time when you come back shortly, I want you to come back with your victory story.
Absolutely.
And Judge Brown, I've got so much respect and honor for you. And I pray that I meet you one day in person so that I can shake your hand and hug you, man.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Judge Joe, I think we want to hear about your barbecue launch.
Oh, yeah.
I want some of that sauce.
We have spices, sauces. They'll be available online or at Kroger's or Albertsons or Walmart shortly before the month's out, I'm told.
Okay.
We were doing some commercials for the release. Also, we will have chicken links, something like this, Beyond Burger meat, also making links out of that.
Now
Barbecue flavor. We have green recipes. We have a chili line. We've got a number of things. And most of the people involved in this are people of color. So it minority enterprise.
Mm.
Well, you know, yeah, I'm going to call you, Judge Brown, because I want some with your signature.
Be my guest, sir.
So that I can brag the next time I cook out. This is,
you know, one thing telling the black folk, I said, you know something? You need to think about the situation. I said, I can claim Native American and black.
yeah.
The difference is they don't name anything after black folk except Martin Luther King Boulevard or Booker T. Washington School or another. Okay?
Yeah.
I guess they have maybe somewhere in that. But they name trains and places after Native Americans, and you guys run around talking about white supremacy, and our guys put scalps on TP or other lodge poles. There's a difference.
That's true. And you know what? We as Indian people, we didn't start that. The Europeans came over here and started scalping people. So we picked up on it and say, okay, we're going to show you how it's really done.
All right. Off of that. So
the other
we're
thing,
hearing.
I wanted to add one other thing. we need some people who are responsible behind this, because the face of prison and criminal justice reform does not need to be a Kim Kardashian.
Mm,
Amen. Amen.
mm-mm.
Or some rapper who's deciding he wants to be relevant by talking nonsense that he knows nothing about. Talking about nonsense relative to a subject he knows nothing about.
That's true. So I just want to say this to all of you. I am so honored to have been on this broadcast with you. And Judge Brown, you got to come back, man.
Anytime. And I tell you what, I want to invite you to my show.
There you go. You've got your podcast.
Okay.
It will be done. Where are you, on the East Coast?
Yeah.
It's 4 to 6 Eastern Standard Time, and the number is 929.
Okay, wait a minute. 929
477
477.
1167.
Okay. You know something?
There's a young lady, Valerie Denise Jones, who is the producer and director, and Doc Johnson has been on there a time or two. She usually calls in. We get a little raw depending upon what's going on, and
It's
but
all
it's
right.
a different kind of discussion, because there are, shall we say, more seasoned people on there usually who have some experiences they want to relate to tomorrow, so that the legacy can keep getting passed on.
That's it.
So Judge Joe, that podcast of yours indicates that it's for mature adults, 35 to 80. So Jay can't watch it because Jay's like 100.
Oh, I'm gonna get you.
I know he's gonna get me. So the last thing I want to point out.
We won't tell anybody.
Okay.
He can chaperone.
There you go. There you go. So there's a rumor that that Memphis, Tennessee is going to have a new mayoral candidate soon. Is that true?
Yes, and one of the things that I am really concerned about is police community reform. I don't care for a police review board. Those are ineffectual. Look at the example of the Pentagon, where you have the commander-in-chief, who's the president. You can have a counterpart, the mayor. You've got a secretary of defense that can be a civilian director of police. You've got a civilian secretary of the Army, Navy, Air Force. You can have a civilian director of each of the major bureaus. You can have the civil service chief sort of as a correspondent to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and a police official as chief of staff for each particular command portion of the police department. So you will involve civilians in the management and direction of the department rather than just review of what's already done.
Well, you know, I'm gonna tell you something, all of you. It's nation time. Back in the 60s and 70s, it was nation time.
Yes, sir.
People of color, Black folks, Native folks, Hispanic folks, we need to vote as a block and stop criticizing each other. We need to learn to speak to each other instead of at each other. That is how we can make a change in this country. We've got to unite, 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 organize, organize, organize. That's how we can overcome. I have the deepest feelings for Dr. Martin Luther King and what he did. But you know what? We need to take that a step further.
A lot further. Dr. King was a young man when he died.
Yes, he was.
And so was Malcolm X, and so were a whole lot of people.
I just had one of our Choctaw sisters. She just made a statement. Halito, that's greetings in Choctaw. Peace and blessings to this chat, and salute to this panel. We can make it happen, but we need all of us working together to make it happen. So if you want to go off on your fragment, go to hell off your fragment. Don't bring that mess to us. We can make it happen. I'm 75 years old and I still got a lot of fight in me.
We're about the same.
Yeah, but I'm your elder.
No, you're not. We're about the same age. So,
Yeah, let me just note, Jay, what you're talking about, that unity and that people coming together to fight this and make a change. If you go to whythismatters.org, there's some good information there. Whythismatters.org. We need to come together and we need to unite to change this foundation, this infrastructure, make it work as it was intended to, or as it should have worked from the beginning. And, I just want to say, Dr. Johnson, thank you so much for being strong. Thank you for standing on your truth, not giving in and allowing them to buy you out and accuse you of something and say that you're guilty of something you didn't do. So I know that's tough. You're going to be living with PTSD and you've had a difficult 10 years and we stand with you. And I thank you so much for everything you're doing and your new organization where you're trying to support people that are experiencing similar things. And of course, Your Honor, thank you so much for hearing Dr. Johnson's story and for supporting her and getting involved, because the 10,000 emails that you get, you could have certainly missed this one. So we all thank you for getting involved and thank you for everything you're doing.
and thank you for doing what you do. We need these alternate sources of communication.
Yes, yes.
Brother Wolf, Night Wolf,
Yes, sir.
we've got a problem.
What's that?
55 years ago, we were talking about being proud of what we are.
Mm.
And we were trying to implement that and go from there. We got infiltrated and subverted.
Mm-hmm.
But nowadays, everybody seems to be in the throes of a grip by some people that don't like what they are and want to be something else.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
They hate what they are and they hate what they want to be. And they cause everybody else to hate. They're against the family. They're against manhood. They're against womanhood. They're against childhood. And it's a sick thing that we have to do something about. It's their right to do it, but we have to push back because destruction of the family is not where anybody is about. The tribe is the family are the children, the mothers, the fathers, the next generation. And if you destroy the fundamental bottom line on all of it, you get nothing. So I'm tired of nihilistic people trying to dictate what happens. And we need some federal reform. And that reform's not just talking about defunding police, because there's some heathen folk out there you don't want running wild.
Yeah, yeah.
And you even have tribal police, so they're needed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But what you do need is some reform of some legislation that's been put in place that not only allows, but encourages persecution of innocent people who are trying to do right, because they step on the toes of people who are doing wrong, but who are politically connected.
That's right.
Like Dr. Johnson, we need to make sure that does not happen. Be careful of what you pay heed to in the interest of what you think is a narrow, good thing, because there may be something hidden behind it. There may be a statute that you think sounds good, but if you read the body of it, Adolf would be proud to be possessed of those particular powers back in 1933.
Mm.
Well, thank you all again, and I'm honored to have been here with you. And I'll be talking to you, Judge Brown, real soon.
Yes, sir.
I'm gonna get you.
And Doc Johnson can tell you how to get in touch with me whenever you want. Feel free to send me a text. Either of you, I think you have them.
Okay.
My dear former acquaintance with your charming self, Miss Saunders, please give Brave Night Wolf my communications data. And sir, please call me.
I might blackmail him a little bit before I give it to him.
That's all right. I know your husband. Your husband is a good friend of mine. Don't try none, it won't be none. I'll leave you all with the words in Cherokee. Danada, Goayi, Wado, and beware of kind snakes. Talk to you next week.